Hey you, welcome back to the channel. And guys, today we're going to talk about Game of Thrones Season 7, Episode 3, The Queen's Justice. So guys, pretty much since we've been watching Game of Thrones, I think we've been waiting on this meeting between Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. And it was an interesting meeting. We got Jon first arriving, on the shores of Dragonstone, greeted by Tyrion, now hand of the Queen to Daenerys, and Missandei, her most trusted advisor. And so I really loved the scene. As I said before, Dragonstone is one of my favorite castle strongholds locations, and we get to see this, so much of Dragonstone as they walk into the entranceway. They walk the cliffs, with these wall pathways to the, to the stronghold, which I thought just looked amazing and looked awesome. But in this audience with Daenerys, of course, Daenerys is recounting the history of her ancestor conquest of Westeros and how Torrhen Stark bent the knee, and that she felt that it was still an oath that should be kept between Jon Snow and her. And Jon basically alludes to, hey, well, as I don't hold you responsible for the sins of your father, or hold you to task on that, you shouldn't hold me to task on the things that my ancestors did, generations ago. And I really liked, how Jon Snow came through in that, because Jon Snow, his leadership has been questionable. And I wasn't sure, what Jon was going to do. I really thought he was going to bend the knee to, save the North, and get Daenerys' help. He stood firm, which I thought, was basically a good move at this present time, even though he knows the White Walkers are coming. But, I could only imagine that would excite even more chaos in the North by him going there to bend the knee after they've, pled with him not to go, only to find out he's, turned over the North to the Targaryens, who at this point, they know were responsible for murdering his father's, or rather his grandfather, what he thinks to be his grandfather, Ned Stark's father, and what would be his uncle. But both uncles, right? But the thing is, the audience, I thought, didn't go well. And I don't know, my issue with the Jon Snow camp is that they were trying to convince Daenerys about White Walkers, and they're sounding like madmen because, of course, people don't know the White Walkers exist. And he's making strange requests. There is no evidence, but as I saw, there was a limb in the earlier Game of Thrones seasons, and I can't remember the exact one. It may have been season 1, actually. I think it was season 1, where a limb was sent to King's Landing. That was a limb of one of the White Walkers, and obviously King's Landing didn't take that message serious. They must have thought a limb could have come from any place or anyone, but basically they have no proof to substantiate their claims, which is odd. They could all be mad. It could be some type of ploy just to throw Daenerys off. It could be a number of things. So I thought that he needed better advisors, a better strategy on dealing with Daenerys with making such a request. And it was just it did kind of get better towards the end, as Tyrion doing a great job he always does, is being a great hand of the Queen now. and being a great counselor and having this wisdom to kind of get these two together to where now Daenerys is at least allowing them to make some headway, letting them mine the dragon glass. So kind of ended better at that point. Then you wonder if Daenerys is believing what Jon is saying, but looks like a lot of this would be believable and look like they're starting to come around because, they're in a world now where dragons have come back. They didn't think dragons would come back. Why would it be so far-fetched to believe that it is not possible for White Walkers to show up? So that's what we got with that scene. We also got Samwell Tarly, back at the Citadel. And Jorah seems quite cured, and he seems on his way once again to reunite with Daenerys and help her in a state where she very much needs his help now, as much help as she can get, as she's just taken tremendous losses so far in her trying to reunite Westeros and rule Westeros. While my predictions were way off, I predicted that Cersei would have been out of here by this episode, and Cersei looks like she's going to be around probably for the rest of this season and maybe even into the next season. But my assumption is they will have Cersei taken care of now by maybe the last episode, and then they'll probably just spend the entire next season on just dealing with the White Walkers and ending the show. So I think that's probably what they're going to do with that. But, getting back to Jorah and Samwell Tarly. So Jorah is, cured of the great scale, it appears. And, Sam and him are saying their farewells. And so Paul to the Archmaester to discuss his insubordination. But it turns out that the Archmaester is pretty impressed with Samwell's sacrifice to save a man's life. So he does allow him to stay, although, he was saying that the risk he put the Citadel at. But it was something interesting that I like in that particular scene, and that is the Archmaester wants him to go through all these record them. And one rumor that's been going on, theory that's been going around is that Samwell Tarly is going to come across some type of information documents that may help him to establish that Jon Snow is in fact a Targaryen, and I'm thinking that these documents may actually have something that's going to lead to that. That's my guess, and that's my theory about that. That's going to lead to perhaps information that gives Samwell Tarly some insight into Jon Snow. So that'll all be great and interesting. But, also what we get is back in the north, we get Sansa. And Sansa is just this very capable ruler we're seeing. Sansa's doing a lot. She's doing a great deal, with how to manage Winterfell and how to rule the north. And, of course, Littlefinger gives his famous speech about fight every battle in your mind and everywhere that we saw in the trailers during this time. And, but what's so interesting about that scene is at the same time we get Bran, who's made it to Winterfell. He's made it to Sansa. And Bran has become the three-eyed raven, as we know. And Bran is this very stoic-like person now. He understands the real picture, the big picture, and so he's not in a mindset anymore of the more petty things that are happening, in the politics of Game of Thrones. He sees the whole world. He knows the White Walkers are coming. He knows who Jon is, and he hasn't revealed it to Sansa yet, because Jon's smart enough to know, or rather Bran's smart enough to know at this point the right time to do it, what it's going to mean. But he also lets them know that he is no longer interested in being the Lord of Winterfell or anything of that nature. He can't be those things. He is the three-eyed raven now. And that's so exciting to see this reunion that Bran's going to get with Jon. But of course, Jon's being held at Dragonstone. He may never make it to Bran this season. You know how Game of Thrones sets things up. So we may not get that. But Sansa is quite convinced that Bran knows what he's talking about, or that his visions are real, because he's talking about things that she only knows about that happened at her wedding with Ramsay. So Bran's was able to see all that and explain to her that, hey, you know, I know what happened. You know, you're very beautiful on your wedding night, but, you know, I'm sorry that those terrible things happened. The sand snakes, you know, being, you know, brought in to King's Landing, being shamed, hit with all matters of trash and from the people of the city. And, you know, Euron has become now this champion of the people. He's taunting Jaime about all these illicit sexual things he wants to do to Cersei, and Jaime's just about to explode. But of course, you know, Jaime, he knows they need Euron at this point. He kind of has to just take it at this stage. But on the good side, you know, what's happening, I guess, to Jaime and Cersei is that they've, you know, they're in power. They don't care who knows about their incestuous affair. You know, they just don't anymore. They're doing how they want to do it. But anyway, the Sand Snakes are, you know, Cersei's getting her revenge about them killing Marcella. And, you know, we see in this just, oh man, Game of Thrones really knows how to set up these most terrible, terrible ways for a person to die. Slow, agonizing deaths. And Tyene Sand, you know, is basically killed like Marcella, but they have it where it's not even a quick death. She's going to die long over time. Cersei gives her this kiss of death poison. And her mom is forced to watch her die, as we got to see. And just a helpless position Ilaria was put in. And, you know, so, and, you know, she has to, and no telling how long Cersei's going to keep her alive to just live with that. She says she's just going to let her live in that cell where she can't kill her, where she can't die. She's just treated terribly until she can, you know, and just every day just suffering and thinking about, you know, what's happened to her daughter and all of her children and loved ones. So very, very, wow, you know, Game of Thrones, you guys sure know how to do it. And of course, you know, Daenerys is aware, you know, she became aware of the problems of losing most of her army. You know, she wants to attack, but it's too dangerous for her to fly dragons, and she could be hit with projectiles and things like that, so they're advising against it. So Daenerys is getting ready for her next move, which I predict is going to be the scene we get with the Field of Fire. And that is them confronting or hitting the Lannister army along with the Tarly army. And I believe they're going to do a lot of damage to that army. We get to see the Dothraki meeting them in the open fields with Robert Baratheon warned against. So what Daenerys' next move I think she's going to do is going to be very exciting. It's going to be, you know, definitely the episode I want to see. I think they're going to inflict a lot of damage to the Lannister army. Now, will the Lannisters be able to stop a dragon or wound a dragon or anything like that? I have no idea. I don't know if they have that catapult or that large crossbow dragon killer thing with them on the move to even be able to use it. I don't know if that's just set up at King's Landing and when they try to sack King's Landing, or if it's something it's mobile. Because if it's not mobile, either that or Daenerys is going to lay siege to the capital itself. I have no idea. And they're trying to meet her before she gets there. I don't know. But it's going to be great to see what happens in that scene. We got Theon, poor Theon, on the ship, read by some other Greyjoys, and they're basically letting him know that they didn't like, what him leaving Yara. We know Yara's been taken prisoner by Euron and is, in a great deal of danger now because, Euron's, we know he plans to kill her because that was the original plan, So, I mean, all just this very, very interesting things going on. Oh, we got Lady Olenna, as they do take Highgarden is taken. It's Highgarden at this time is the richest country in the world. So, or I'm sorry, province, city in the world. And so basically, the Iron Bank paid Cersei a visit. Cersei said, give her a fourth night, and they'll have all that the Iron Banks requires as far as complete payment of debt. So, we can see that that's going to be, Highgarden's going to play a big role in making that possible for Cersei to pay off the Iron Bank. And then also have the Iron Bank fund her in order to stop Daenerys, as the Iron Bank doesn't see Targaryens as good business partners. They stop business. They will create a situation where there is no way to create wars, because they will just create a pure dynasty where I don't think the Iron Bank will be able to capitalize on it or even capitalize on slavery. As we know, this new ruler, Daenerys Targaryen, is against slavery and it's costing the Iron Bank a great deal of money. So they have no choice but to side with Cersei. So this is not good for Daenerys. Bad predictions. Game of Thrones really threw a curveball at me. As far as how things would go, I thought this would be a 1-2-3 punch. Instead, it's it's like one of these sports games you're watching when you got the win, and the team just makes the team that's thought to win, and the underdog, he comes back fighting, and he's just winning at every turn. It's a total upset. Interesting stuff. But Lady Olenna, she's after Highgarden is seized. She's going to be killed, and Jaime trying to be somewhat Jaime has redeemed a lot over the episodes, and although it's still a lot of things about Jaime that's negative towards his character, as Lady Olenna led him on about Cersei as his destruction. If it wasn't for Cersei, he'd pretty much be a good guy. And Cersei has been in between him and everybody, that all the decent folk that could that could see Jaime being a good person. But he can't let go of Cersei, and as Lady Olenna lets him know that she will destroy him ultimately. And I got some ideas and theories about that Jaime will die, as a result of, being with Cersei, but I think they will die together. But Lady Olenna, before she takes her poison and kills herself, she lets on that Joffrey, she was behind his murder. And, of course, that really devastates Jaime, upsets him a lot. Things going to change a lot of his position and going forward and how he deals with people. But, guys, a solid episode. I have to give this episode, I guess I would have to give it about oh, wow, guys. I guess a 9. I would have gave it a 10, but I just didn't like Jon Snow's lines. I didn't like his story about how he's, how he came to deal with Daenerys, how he just rushed off. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a good strategy on how to deal with people. Because we got to remember something. For the rest of the kingdom, much like we got to see in the pilot episode or the very first episode of Game of Thrones, people do not believe in the White Walkers. They think this is myth and legend. And even when we, in the very first episode, get to see this guy beheaded, and he's, basically went AWOL, and, left the Night's Watch. He's talking about the White Walkers. Ned Stark, before he executes him, he goes, well, a madman sees what he sees. In other words, if you're talking about White Walkers, you're crazy. But the one good thing in Jon Snow's favor is before Davos can tell the story about him coming back from the dead, which Jon stopped him, which was one of the smartest things I ever seen Jon do. So far since he's been the ruler and the king of the north, was to stop Davos from telling that story. Because although I guess their story at this point was such a story looked at as a story being told by madmen, that it maybe wouldn't have made that big of a difference. But maybe it would have just been too much. But anyway, guys, that's my thoughts and review here on this episode of Game of Thrones. Awesome episode. Best of the season so far. Gets a 9. Don't know what's going to be able to top that. Perhaps the battle scene coming up, but it's going to pick up. It can only go up from now. You can't come down. The way they've set these events in motion, you can't really come down off of this now. So I'm just going to stay in high gear to the rest of the season. But anyway, guys, if you like content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe. And until next time, take care.